Today I'm going to show you the two easiest and most common ways of hooking your one guitar up into two amplifiers at once. Both of these ways have got some pros and some cons. I'll share those with you in a moment, but first, really quickly, I'll show you how to do it. The first method is by using an effect stop box. Any kind of effect that has got two outputs on it. Most chorus pedals, a lot of delays, and a bunch of other modulation type effects will commonly have two outputs, and it's as simple as hooking amp A into output A and amp B into output B. That's the first method. The second method is by getting yourself one of these, an ABY box, which you hook up the same way. Amp A goes into output A, amp B goes into output B, and the input is your guitar, or the end of your effects chain. The difference between this and using this is that with the ABY pedal you're able to select one amplifier, the other amplifier, or both at once. So those are your two most common and easiest ways of hooking up two amps. Now let's get a little bit more in depth. Alright, so here are the problems you're going to run into when you're using an effect pedal or an entry-level ABY switcher to hook two amps up together. You're going to run into two very common problems. The first one is going to be phase, and the second one is ground loop. I will talk about both of them, but first I'll talk about phase. Phase, when I'm talking about that, I'm not talking about how the mics are being run, if the microphones are in and out of phase. This is completely different. This should be called the polarity, but everybody refers to it as phase. So what is happening when your amp's out of phase? Amplifier A is working as usual. The speaker is pulsing out as you're playing guitar and it's pushing air out. But when it's out of phase, amplifier B is sucking the air in and the speaker is working the wrong way. So the result of that is that nice thick bottom and low end that you get from running two amps together is gone. It's replaced with more of a honky MIDI kind of sound, and it's working against you instead of working for you. If you've got a little bit nicer quality ABY switch, this is very easy to fix. There is a phase switch. This is 180 degrees. It's as easy as flipping it one way or the other, and you'll be able to tell immediately if your speaker is pushing the air or sucking the air in just by the sound. Here's an example. I just took the camera, put it really tight on one of my speaker cabinets that had a bit of loose grill cloth, and I switched from in phase to out of phase, and you'll see the grill cloth getting pushed out, and then you'll see it getting sucked back in. Okay, so for the purpose of this video, I'm just gonna play an E chord muffled, and the audio you're gonna hear is just gonna be the camera audio. It's not important that we get great audio on this. I just want to show you the difference between in phase and out of phase. When an amp speaker is in phase, it will push air out. It will look like this. If you watch the grill cloth, and when it's in phase, it pushes out, like I said. And when it's out of phase, the speaker works the wrong way. It actually sucks the air in. Okay, so let's say you don't have one of these and you don't have the ability to switch the phase right on the unit because you're using a stomp box or a more entry-level ABY switch. What do you do then? Well, then it gets a little bit complicated, and what you'll need to do is, if you're using head and cabinet, two heads and two cabinets, what you'll need to do is grab the speaker cable off of one of them, unplug it obviously, and then unsolder the two wires inside, and then flip them around, solder them back, and then plug it back in. Now you'll be running the polarity in the opposite direction and because this has flipped it, what you've done by switching the cables around is now you flipped it again in the proper direction. If you're running a combo, like a single speaker combo, you'll have to unplug the leads from the speaker, switch them around, plug them back in. Alright, so now I'm going to give you a demonstration of what ground loop hum is. It's a super pervasive, unavoidable hum that comes when you run 2 amps together through a stomp box of any flavor or through an ABY box. So just to show you for an example, right behind me I've got this Morris amp plugged into a 210 cabinet that is absolutely cranked right now, and I've got this Fender Blues Junior that is on as well. I don't know if you can even hear the amps are on, but if you can, it's very quiet. I'll play you a couple chords through the Blues Junior. No hum, no problems, nice and good. So I'm going to throw this on standby, turn this off, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug into a regular stomp box. I'm going to show you a picture of it, and that line is going to run to it. This is my guitar. So now I'm plugged in through the stomp box, and now I'm going to take the amp off standby, turn this amp on, volume rolled up on the guitar, you can hear the Morris, and there comes the Blues Junior, and there is the super awesome ground loop hum. It's going to come through whether I play loud or whether I play quiet. So if you're trying to be super sensitive dude and rock out some sweet quiet licks, well, you're going to have this coming through at the same time. That's really annoying. So how do you get rid of that awesome annoying ground loop hum? Well, if you've got an ABY switcher like this one, then you're in luck, because this has a ground lift on it as well as the phase switch, so it takes care of all of those problems. This isn't the only company or the only model available out there. I'll show you some more. However, if you're using the stomp box method, well, there's not really much you can do to get rid of that ground loop hum. There are ways around it, which are 1000% not something I would recommend, and they're very dangerous. I'm not even going to tell you how to do it, but by doing so you could really put yourself at risk for getting a pretty nasty shock if you're in North America, or a unbelievably nasty shock if you're in Europe. So that's kind of the only way that you can avoid ground loop hum safely, is by using one of these boxes. This one, or the dad version, or any other company that makes pedals with a lift and a phase on them. So that takes care of basically your two major issues, your phase and your ground loop. Okay, so lastly, I'm going to talk about how a lot of people are going to say, well, I have the stereo chorus pedal and I have this delay pedal because I want my effects to be in stereo. I want ping-ponging delay, and through an ABY switcher I'm not going to get the true ping-pong, back and forth delay, or that rotary speaker feeling like it's coming through the both cabinets or both amps sound. Well, you're right. Like, if you run it through this way, you're not going to get that. But running true stereo is wicked fun at rehearsals and stuff. But the reality is, once you get into most clubs, most sound techs aren't going to run you in full stereo, for a lot of reasons, because there's going to be 2 or 3 or 4 other bands on the bill with you that night, and they're going to be short on inputs, or because their rig itself isn't a stereo rig that can separate and pan things. So what you can do as an alternative that's really fun still is to run your ABY pedal as you normally would. So all of your effects go into, and then you go into the input, And then before you go out to your 2 amps, one output will go to 1 amp, and then before you hook up the other output, that's where you put the delay or the chorus or the rotary speaker. So what that'll do is it'll give you what's called a wet-dry signal. So you'll have 1 amp where that effect is happening and the other amp where that effect is not happening. And it'll give you kind of a simulated stereo effect. It'll sound really cool on the delays. It'll sound really neat on a stereo chorus effect, and it'll sound pretty cool with any of those effects, really. And it's not running true stereo, but it's still running a really cool sound for you on stage, where you're not going to run into those phase problems and those ground loop hum problems. So that's kind of a third alternative, but those are your ways right there to hook your guitar up into 2 amps at once. It does get a lot more complicated than that. You can run one of these into one of these to hook up 3 amps going at once, or you could buy a tripler pedal, or you can get all sorts. You can get really in depth into it. This is the basic way, the easiest and the most common way, and how to solve some of those problems. So I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you'd like, and I'll make another video soon. Thanks.